here is we continue. We're about 2 weeks from Erev Rosh Hashanah. Well, in 2 weeks it'll be Rosh Hashanah. So we are going to review the Chiddush that we said last week, which is regarding the superstructure of the Book of Devarim as a master plan. And I'll use an analogy not to be frivolous, chas v'shalom. But as we said, Moshe Rabbeinu was kvad peh, kvad lashon. He was not an orator. He didn't even feel worthy of appearing before the king and making a presentation of any kind. So much so that Aaron was considered his navi, meaning that he had to speak on Moshe's behalf. But by the time we get to the Book of Devarim, Moshe is not only a wonderful and gifted orator, but he is a poetic orator. As he says, Kisvu li et hashira hazot. And shir, as we mentioned, is a poem in Hebrew. So that's like the highest form of expression, not only just the spoken word, but the spoken word in its most, I say, elevated literary style would be the poetry. It's like the song of speech, which is close to song. That's why it's called Shiur. So how did that happen? Because Hashem, through Moshe, gave the Torah, and we know the first 4 books of the Torah were given to Moshe Rabbeinu without his participation, except that he was a voice box for Kosh Baruch. He was a holy kli. He was a kli, but nothing more than a kli. The words of Hashem reverberated from the throat of Moshe. Migrono shel Moshe, Chazal tell us. Moshe did not have anything to do with it other than preparing himself for that level of Kedusha, that he could be the receptacle through which the Torah would flow. Each and every word was composed by Hashem. Not so Sefer Devarim. Sefer Devarim is a completely different situation, where Chazal tell us that Moshe Rabbeinu did use his own intellect to formulate the words. That means that Hashem gave him a bigadol message, and themes and mitzvos, but Moshe had a hand, however we can understand this, in the way it was articulated, and most importantly, in the order in which it was presented. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, in the last 5 weeks of his life, he began Sefer Devarim on the first day of Chodesh Shvat, and he ends on Zayin Adar. Right? That's 5 weeks. Presented the entire book of Devarim, and I would like to say, think about it, lahavdil elf havdals in modern terms, an educational seminar. He gathered the entire Jewish people, and he says, I'm going to teach you exactly how to be successful in your quest to build Torah in Eretz Yisrael, and which means the following: to take the experience of Har Sinai and move that mountain where? That mountain is going to be transferred to Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem, which will eventually be the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim. That's why in Sefer Devarim, particularly in Parshas Re'eh, we speak constantly about Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem. The idea is to take Har Sinai, and let it be transferred, the Kedusha of it, the structure of it, the organization of it, to Yerushalayim, which is a process. Every single word of Sefer Devarim was said in a super logical sequence. It was the most brilliant, logical presentation. Now, most people struggle with Sefer Devarim because you feel like the mitzvahs are all over the place. You're going from Shiluach HaKan, and Yafas Torah, and this and that. And Chazal teach us that there is sequence. It's called Darshin Smuchin. We look at the connectivity from section to section, from parsha to parsha. Now, Rashi does not generally agree that the sequence of the Torah is important. He says, what's the famous phrase? Ein muktam uma'uchar. Not like the Ramban. The Ramban says we have to assume that there's a logical order unless the Torah tells us otherwise. by putting events that we know that the dates were not in particular order. Like, for example, the biggest argument was, when did Yisro come? Did Yisro come after Matan Torah or before Matan Torah? According to Rashi, he came after Matan Torah. According to the Ramban, no. Parshas Yisro appears, Seres Adibus appears subsequent to the visit of Yisro, and therefore the Ramban learns that it happened before. And he left either probably the day after, or maybe even before. But it's sequential. However, when it comes to the book of Devarim, due to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's intellect guided the formulation, every member of Chazal says, Darshin Smuchin. We look at the sequence of it as significant, and even Rashi uses that tool to explain simple pshat. Now that was this past week's parsha. Who remembers a smichut parshiot, that the sequence of the mitzvos, Rashi says it's there in a special order because it's teaching us. Moshe Rabbeinu's message is not only the words itself, but the sequence of the mitzvos. What's an example of that? Let's start with Yefas Toar. What is Yefas Toar? That's correct. The first thing is, what is a... very good, Julie. We all met our friends, Julie Frank and her mom, Mrs. Frank. Newly minted olim to mishkafayim, even though only her mother's wearing glasses. Okay. So there you go. Rashi says one of the meanings, the hidden meanings, and not even so hidden because Rashi only speaks about pshat. It's outrageous that Rashi would say that there's smichut parshiot, because his general opinion is that there's no, and we mentioned that the Sefer HaChinuch also says, look at the mitzvos of Devarim, you don't have to look at them in sequence, look at them individually, ein muktim v'chubar tova. But even Rashi agrees. Now, what was the sequence? It's talking about Milchemes Rishus, and this is very, very important because this is going to be the bedrock of today's shiur. There are 3 types of war that the Jewish people fight. This is all recorded in the Rambam Hilchos Malachim, the laws of warfare. 2 are obligatory, and 1 is optional. Obligatory are called what? Milchemes Mitzvah or Chova, and the other one is called Milchemet Rishut, optional war. Which nations are we obligated to battle? And I'll tell you exactly what that means, we're obligated to battle them. It doesn't mean you just go out and exterminate them. There's a process and a procedure. Who are the nations that we're obligated to obliterate? Amalek, and who else? And the 7 nations, right. Those 2 milchamos. What's the difference between the 2? What's the difference between Amalek and Shiva Amamim? Shiva Amamim is related to Eretz Yisrael. The reason why we're obligated to fight them is because we have to remove them from Eretz Yisrael. Amalek, the battle is anywhere and everywhere. Some suggest that Esther and Mordechai hung the 10 sons of Haman, right, was not just that they were at war with Haman via the Persian ruler Achashverosh, but it actually was a kiyum of Milchemes Amalek. And in fact, who was their ancestor that was given the mitzvah and didn't quite execute it properly? Shaul. So Chazal link that very clearly. And they see, therefore, that Milchemet Amalek took place in Shushan HaBira, or in the United Nations, or anywhere you find them. But Sheva Amamim is unique to Eretz Yisrael. If you see a member of the Sheva Amamim in a Milchemet Rishus, what's an example of Milchemet Rishus? There were 2 types of Milchemet Rishus. You ready? This you're going to have to write down because I'm going to give it to you this way because you're going to have to understand this. Ki Teitzei. There are 3 Teitzes, and they spell something. They're Roshei Tevos. This is from the Abir Yaacov, the 10th generation of the Abba Chutzera family, whose grandson is the Baba Sali, and whose sperm are now coming out beautifully and in print. This is called Pituchei Chotam. He was the greatest of the Moroccan rabbis in terms of the literature that he left to us and the miracles that he performed. Top. I mean, maybe the earlier generations did bigger miracles, but they didn't leave us svarim like this. He has a plethora of svarim. And this is his Perush al Chumash, which is an extraordinary pshat, and he says there were 3 types of kitetzes. I'm going to get to that in a second. I would like to suggest that they represent the 3 types of wars. Okay? That's my addition, but I think that's kind of what he's referring, what he means anyway. And we'll see in a second. I'm going to read his words inside with you. So, Milchemet Rishus means the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim, to expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael, to build the empire, on condition that you have already captured the land of the 7 nations. At which point you are entitled, the king is entitled to wage an additional war to widen out the influence of Eretz Yisrael, both monetarily and on other ways too, because the second type of war is lichvod malchuto, so that the king should be revered. Because if you got this tiny country, you know what I mean? You're not the leader of the world. But Shlomo HaMelech was the leader of the world. We speak about the most famous leaders of the world of all time as having vast empires, not a small geographic area, which is 400 by 400 parsaot, which is all Eretz Yisrael is. Small. But if you want to be influential in the world, you have to have territory. Who were the most influential kings in the modern era? Or go back in Tanakh. Who was the most powerful kings that controlled the most territory? Alexander the Great, and he didn't even control it very long because he died very young. And he broke up his kingdom, broke up immediately into 4 parts. Persia was a massive kingdom, but it was also 2 parts, Paras and Madai. It was a combination of 2 nations. There was one king before that who really was the ultimate world monarch of all time. Lahavdil, the Babe Ruth of Goyisha exiles. Who was he? Go back. Nebuchadnezzar. In fact, Daniel reveals the dream of the 4 Galuyot to Nebuchadnezzar and says, this is the future of the Jewish people. I'm going to tell you right now. Your rule is ending because Babel's going to be finished with. But right now, Nebuchadnezzar, you are the golden head of this massive creature, like a robot or humanoid, that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, forgot his dream, and said, I'm going to kill every advisor I have until they tell me 2 things. What did I dream? And what's the interpretation? And the only person who could do it, and he started killing everybody. He says, how are you supposed to know what he dreamt? Daniel davened and Hashem revealed to him. What's the story? The golden head, Nebuchadnezzar, singular. He was the most powerful ruler in the history of man after Shlomo HaMelech. This is why you see Achashverosh is still trying to recapture the throne of Shlomo. And you look at the Midrashim, Achashverosh. But we know there was a flow, but there was a demarcation line, and that's the death of Belshazzar and the Malchut of Daryavish. In other words, it's an overnight thing, and Daniel was the transitional figure between the 2. I don't want to go into that. That's off field. But Daniel saw the handwriting on the wall. Like you say, you see the handwriting on the wall? Mm-hmm. The handwriting said that Babel was over, and the next kingdom was going to be Paros Umadai. That's why we find Daniel in Shushan Habira, very, very far from Babel, all the way deep into Iraq, even Iran, really Iran, deep into Iran. You know where Shushan is? All the way, very far from Iraq. Iraq is Babel. Right. Iran is very far from there, Shushan. That's where he relocated the kingdom, the empire. So they are the golden arms of the humanoid, the silver arms, 2 arms, Paras and Madai. But you see, they're 2. They're not 1 anymore. The chest was a copper chest. Does anybody know who that represented? Who was the next? You mentioned his name already. Alexander. Copper is Keneged Yavan, Rome. That was the heart. And the torso and the 2 iron legs are Edom. which, by the way,
Isn't that Rome?
yeah, which is Rome. And Rome had two permutations: ancient Rome, pagan Rome, and what else? Christian Rome, which I'll say is why there's two legs. And then on the bottom of the vision, there were 10 toes, which were mixed ceramic and steel. The legs are steel. Steel is the strongest metal. Esav lives by the sword. His main thing is power, might, and weaponry. Ad hayom hazeh, the Christian world dominates, except for Israel to a certain extent. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shacham yorah.
What about you?
Copper's Alexander Great. Good question. He's not even part of it. You know why? He's the 10 toes. I'll explain. The 10 toes is the very, very end. It's galvanized steel. What does galvanized steel mean? It's mixed in with like a ceramic. It's ceramic and steel. The Yishmaelim are ceramic. They're pottery. It's very easy to break them. They're not warriors. Iran's still trying to figure out how to build a nuclear weapon. Israel had it 70 years ago. So then what's the holdup? Hey guys, what's the holdup? You know? This is technology that the world had in the 40s. Where are you? It's now 2018 and they can't pull their act together. Because they're Yishmaelim, the essence, and they're not fighters. They're not fighters. They're people of the desert. They're people who live in the desert, nomadic.
Yeah, but they live by the sword. Now Hashem tells Ishmael, they live by the sword.
Yado al yad, it's a different thing. They steal from each other, but they don't kill each other. They kill each other, but there's a difference between conducting a massive war. The only one in history was the original war where they conquered North Africa in 622, and then smaller campaigns in Eretz Yisrael. But basically, they're still talking about Lahavdil, the World Series that they won in the year 622. They're still going back to that. That was our big day, And Salahuddin, who conquered Israel during the time of the Rambam, he said that was like the last big hurrah that they had. That's a long time ago. And the Ottoman Empire was a somewhat continuation of that. I don't want to get into it, but those are Europeans. The Turkish and the Iranians are not Arabs. They're not Arabs, okay? They're quasi-Edom because they're really European.
Oh, yeah?
Classic Arabs live in Egypt. They live in Syria. In the time of Nasser, Yimach Shemo, there used to be the Syrian Arab Republic. If you remember, it was a combination between Egypt and Syria, for those who still remember that, because those are Arabs. Saudi Arabia, Arabs. Iraq, Arabs. Libya, Arabs. Even further out a little bit, Arabs. All the way till you get, closer across the middle, Libya. So those Arabs are not a threat to the world in a military sense. They're a pain in the neck. Everybody needs them, and they create terrible problems, but they will never dominate the world. Hence, they didn't make it into the vision of the four Goliot. They're just going to make us a lot of problems. What did Yishmael do to Yitzchak? What did Yishmael do to Yitzchak? Shot arrows at him. Does that sound familiar? What did Saddam Hussein do at us? Threw arrows at us. What are they doing in Gaza? That's about it. That's about it. It's serious, but it's life-threatening, but it's not a mortal danger. Okay? So the 10 toes represent a combination of Christian and Muslim states. That each one of them is not significant enough to dominate the world, but together they will dominate and do what? Prevent the Jewish people from reaching the tachlis that we started to talk about at the beginning of Devarim, which means to transplant Har Sinai into Har Abayis. And I don't go into modern day things, but the forces that are preventing that are all part of those 10 toes. There are a lot of players in that. Who's adamant? No Jewish presence on Har Abayis. Certainly no Torah presence on Har. Who's fighting that? Who's not fighting that? Who are the biggest fighters against it? Besides the Arabs here, and then you have Turkey, and then you have the European Union, and then you have this one and that one, and China and Russia, you name it, and even the United States.
What's the European Union's stake?
Edom. Because Edom is a Golus. that as long as Rome is powerful, Yerushalayim is not powerful. Their power is on the wane, but that's another story. Let's get back to here. So Milchemet, what?
It's so interesting to see the modern applications of this.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to sit and think about the 10 nations that are intertwined, Islam, and that's why Islam is on the very bottom, because they're just cheres. But who's going to equip them? Edom. Edom is basically done. Edom cannot come at the Jewish people directly, only through them Ishmaelim. And this is because, and this the Ramchal teaches, exactly, because as the Ramchal teaches, Edom is linked to the Yetzer Hara, and the Satan. He's our primary enemy. Hu hay Malach HaMaves, a Satan, he's the forces of destruction. Esav just became the embodiment of destruction, the person who carries it out, the Hitler, you know what I'm saying, who becomes the Malach HaMaves. Like the Nazis wore on their SS uniforms, what did they wear on top of their heads? You ever saw pictures of Eichmann? Skulls, death skulls. They were the shlichim of the Malach HaMaves.
Wow.
Shluchim. And they wanted to be. And they decided to be, and they portrayed themselves as such. So Esav in that sense was just unfortunately hijacked by the Satan and became his agent, but it's in a way, it's always for the good, because what Hashem sends the Satan and punishes us, what is the purpose of it? Just to make us suffer? Chas v'shalom. Hashem wants us to suffer? It's all about doing tshuva. Okay. So the 10 ceramic steel toes are all the nations today in the world which have their claws, they're like claws, they're dug in to keep the Jewish people from doing what? Having a Torah state with a Beit HaMikdash at its core. Because if you don't have the core, you don't have a Torah state. Because what sits in the Beit HaMikdash? The Sanhedrin.
Wait a minute, what was the beginning of that?
Okay. The full implementation of Har Sinai only works if you have the replication of Har Sinai, which means Torah is at the top of the mountain. Where is the Torah on top of the mountain and the Shekhinah's presence? Through Matan Torah, the Sanhedrin, who received the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, Chula b'chula b'chula, and the Sanhedrin is of our generation, Mitzvah Hashem, are the ones who hold the Torah.
What's preventing that?
The 10 toes of the beast. That's Daniel's vision, and Daniel is the book which has the secrets of the Geula, by the way. If you really want to know. Because I'll speak about this at length, we can't decipher it, but there's passages in the book of Daniel which speak about a certain amount of time. I don't want to go into it, but maybe we'll do a different shiur on it. Nobody knows what it means. And you know what Hashem said to Daniel at the end you ever read the book of Daniel?
People can read it, it's not
My friend is saying the husband if I eat bar mitzvah, that's what the scene was on. Because we're going to tell you.
I know.
Daniel's mostly Aramaic. But today there's art scrolls, so what are you worried about?
My neighbor.
You can also go online. I mean, today, Jewish wisdom is accessible to anyone, Jew and non-Jew.
But so many people interpreted the Simanim of Geula, and they were wrong.
Right. But here you see in Tanakh that Daniel asked Hashem to reveal the exact process, because anyway Hashem had revealed to him so much. He had many nevuos about Jewish history. He is the one Navi, or what do you want to say, Ruach HaKodesh, that understood, since he was the first Galus, he was a member of the first Galus, right? He and his friends were taken to the arch Gola, Nebuchadnezzar's palace, to serve him.
You can't do what there?
The problem, I can't go into that, but how you look at Daniel as a Navi, yeah, he was a Navi. No, he had it because he was in Eretz Yisrael first. You can't get Nevuah in Chutz La'aretz unless you've been established Navi in Eretz Yisrael. You can carry it over, but you can't start being a Navi in Chutz La'aretz.
So
No.
he gave Hashem gave like all these nevuos.
In Bavel, in Iraq. So too Yecheskel on the river Chebar, because they were already Nevi'im. So Hashem continued to give them Nevuah, but you couldn't become a Navi unless what? the Beis HaMikdash is in place, that's when Nevuah will come back. So not only is it holding back all the goodness of the world that Hashem wants to shower the world that we see in the Nevi'im with wealth, health, regenerative medicine, cures to every disease, and all these things are starting because we're inching closer, not even inching closer, we're going closer and closer to that reality, but the 10 toes are dug in very, very, very strong. There has been movement in this past year, which we have to be very grateful. What was the movement? Yeah. Trump's recognition of Yerushalayim is a major step forward, and he's about to take another major step forward, which is incredible. And even though his kavanas may be not l'shem shamayim, Hashem doesn't care. He's got plenty of tools in his toolbox. Plenty of tools in his toolbox. He's about to do an incredible thing. You know what it is? First of all, he's pressuring Iran, which is amazing. He's punishing the enemies of Hashem, our arch. In other words, the war against Amalek and the war against Iran today, you could make easy comparisons, right? They are committed to our and by the way, if you want to understand Haman, I always like to say a good word about the villains, because that's very Hasidish, to always speak nicely of the villains. So you know what happened to Haman's children, the other ones that didn't die? How is that possible?
That's a whole other story.
And you know what happened to Haman's money?
Oh, no, the tax, it goes to the second.
Yeah.
The tax, that was the
So let me ask you a question. Haman can walk around and say, my Einiklech, a big Tamid Chachamim, Hakigeven Asach Geld zum Beis HaMikdash. He's a größer tzaddik.
That was not his purpose.
It wasn't his purpose, but it was the outcome. That's like the nations of the world are going to come to Hashem and say, maybe we didn't think about doing it for that reason, but we ended up doing it, so give us credit. Right? And in a way, Chazal are telling us that Haman does get credit to a certain extent, because his children teach Torah. What other credit could you have? Is there a greater credit than that? To say that your children are Tamidei Chachamim, teaching Torah?
You didn't intend for them to do it.
But that
It's
was
only
also-
a
isn't
success
like-
if they
isn't like-
learned it at home and they...
It's like
Isn't it like Lot running to tell Avram,
exactly, and he got schluss.
Right.
You're talking about Og Melech HaBashan.
Right, I forgot.
Og Melech HaBashan wanted Sarah dead. No, wanted Avram dead so he could marry Sarah. So he runs and tells Avram, go fight those 4 or 5 kings were. They were the powers of the world. They were the most mighty army. Who's he fighting? Anyway, but he wanted Avram dead. But Moshe Rabbeinu was terrified of him because he was the one who brought Lot back. Why is Lot important? That's right. So ask yourself a question. Does he have merit? Og Melech HaBashan, the arch enemy of Moshe Rabbeinu? Who has more credit for bringing Mashiach? Him or Moshe? Wow, good question. Because that neshama that was in Moab, Moshe had nothing to do about it coming back. But Og Melech HaBashan had everything to do about it coming back. That's why things are so interesting. When Chazal look at things, you cannot draw black and white lines. Don't ever try, because you will ultimately fail. Chazal are much more nuanced and see multidimensional factors, because Hashem thinks that way. Lo machshavosai, machshavosai. The way Hashem thinks and operates, you would never believe it. You in your right mind, as a regular frum person, you would say, no way. I don't want this guy involved with the Jewish people. The last person I want. Okay, so that's our part of our challenge, to listen to the words of Chazal. Listen to Chazal. Be open. Harbe shluch in the makam. So what Trump is about to do,
Yes.
which will happen September the 25th. Does anybody know what day that comes out in the Hebrew calendar? Can we check that out? September 25th in the Hebrew calendar. What day is that?
And what will happen?
I'll tell you in a minute. First tell me what day it is. It's the first day of Chalamayit, okay? What's Sukkot famous for? To what? To the 70 nations coming to be, right? It's the triumph of Yerushalayim over the 70 nations, right? What is he about to do? Well, one of the biggest scams and anti-Semitic and anti-Israel chasadim that the world calls chesed, but really is murder. As we say, chesed leumim chatas. Pasuk says when the goyim are doing something collectively, leumim, collectively towards the Jewish people, they could say it's a chesed, but it's really to murder them. So what's the great chesed, or any chesed? So what chesed are they doing? They're giving money to refugees, to Nebuch, who were kicked out of their homes in Palestine. How many of them? And they've had their own division of the United Nations refugee, which is outrageous because there is no country. There's a high commissioner for refugees. He settles every refugee issue. Most of the time they resettle in other countries, and that's the end of it. No. Palestinians are perpetual refugees, much like the Jewish people, because they're like the foil of the Jewish people who are eternal. So they're eternal. It's the opposite. 5 million of them. If they come back, there's no more Israel. There'll just be a simple democratic majority, and we're done, which is what Iran's plan is. Iran does not think it can destroy Israel militarily, but it does seek to destroy it politically, and so does the European Union. Where they tell you they're not. But they want to still make money from them, so they may leave it a little bit around. You know what I'm saying? As long as they're making money, they'll leave Israel somewhat alive, because they don't want to lose the goods, the payday. But other than that, we're going to kill you. That's why they can distinguish between Yerushalayim and the rest of Israel, because they don't want the geula. They do want the money of the Jew, because monies of the Jews, as Rabbi Nachman says, is the most Yetzer Hara that there is in the world. You know what it is? The Yetzer Hara of a goy for Jewish money. There is no greater Yetzer Hara in the world. Compares to nothing. Wait a second. So what is Trump going to do? Trump is going to do the following. He's going to say, this business of the 5 million is a bunch of baloney. We are going to say that the real number is 500,000. Still not a small number, but a heck of a lot better than 5 million. And that is about to happen on Sukkot, when the nations of the world are judged. And who's the one that's supposed to be davening for them? And they come to give a pidyon, we bring karbanos for them on Sukkot. That's when we bring karbanos for the 70 nations. So it's a little bit, I say, if it would have been Hashanah Rabbah, I would have said it would have been perfect. It's first day Chol HaMoed, Simchas Beis HaShoeva. It's a step towards recognizing that Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jewish people, and the Beis HaMikdash belongs on Har HaBayis. 10 claws, powerful nations, in combination, have bound together to prevent that at all costs. But it's inching. Maybe you should go quick. All right, so now.
It's Yom Tov Sheni, though.
And it's Yom Tov Sheni?